Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Westview Podcast. This is Pastor Marty here in Boulder, Colorado at Westview Church as we are wrapping up our six-part series on why Matthew. As we engage the Gospel of Matthew this year, these are some things to think about. And it's been quite a little journey of learning how Matthew's focus on creating disciples is the centerpiece of his gospel, and how the way and the walk of the way is a command, and we learn how to follow. Today, I'm going to close it up with sort of a beginning as well, which is why follow comes first. I'm going to wrap this up today, and I want to sort of say this thesis as clearly as possible. Matthew teaches discipleship as a process where following comes first and understanding comes later. And that's not a flaw in the gospel. That is the pedagogy of Matthew. And Matthew is not trying to create an audience of informed religious consumers. He's trying to create disciples. And disciples are made by walking, not by winning theology trivia. We've dealt with the walking in the last couple episodes, but this idea of theological trivia is worthy of taking a look at, because sometimes our understanding of the Bible or of religious discussions falls in that trivia category and not something that's going to affect our decisions. Matthew's pedagogy sort of gives its clue right away at the beginning when he uses the word over and over again, and that word is immediately. You go back to the first call story in Matthew 4, Jesus says, "Follow me," and Matthew says they followed immediately. The word immediately is doing work for Matthew. It means that he wants you to see that the discipleship is not primarily a negotiated intellectual agreement. It's a decisive reorientation. You step into the path, and then the path teaches you. This is why Matthew doesn't bring us along the way modern people expect. He doesn't make a case for you to decide to follow Jesus. He says, "Follow me," and then he teaches. And that's the discipleship role. That is the difference between that consumer decision and the disciple decision. Modern people want, the pastor or the preacher to explain it really well and to prove it somehow through the Bible or a map. They want us to make it really easy for them. And then what they'll do is then they'll decide whether or not they're going to believe it or not. It's such the current state of all things consumer. But Matthew says very simply, follow, practice, fail, learn, be changed. This is apprenticeship, not a classroom. This is not a place where it's equal and your questions really are going to guide the teacher. You got to catch up to the apprentice. That's the difference in that motif, the difference in that relationship. You can learn by doing, and that's the whole point. Think about Matthew, how he structures the teachings of Jesus. First, you get the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5-7, and then it ends with a warning. Hearing without doing is life building a house on sand. Hearing and doing is a life in a house that's built on a rock. That means discipleship is not an internal agreement. It's embodied practice. And it could be joyful practice. It could be happy practice. But it's practice. And I can remember being on teams where the coach would tell us, now it's time to run 40-yard sprints. And I would have never chosen that for my preparation for the game. But the coaches did, and I got on the line. And that's the difference between a classroom and an apprenticeship through practice. It means that, Matthew, as his disciples go through it, you could see them live this reality. They don't understand, and they often ask. They often are panicked, and then they get corrected. That's a big one. Jesus lets them get panicked. He lets them taste the freight of the question or the fear, and then he corrects them. It's a teaching way. It's a powerful teaching way. It gives them the full authority to be in total control and realize they need more than just their own control. and they fail, and then they get called forward again to try again. Matthew leaves all that in because he wants you and me to know that this is how it works. Discipleship is not the elimination of confusion. It's learning how to keep walking while confused. That's the key. And this is why follow first is a spiritually necessary first step. The deeper reason he does it this way is that if Jesus gave full explanation first, we would turn discipleship into a theory. We'd stay over in the stands, talking about it, thinking about it. We'd remain managers of our own lives. We'd keep the power. But the call, follow me, pulls you onto the field. And once you're on the field, the gospel starts doing its work just naturally. The Sermon on the Mount stops being a beautiful text and starts being a mirror. Your money becomes a discipleship issue. Your anger becomes a discipleship issue. Your marriage, your enemies, your truthfulness or lack of truthfulness, your ability to forgive other people or lack of ability to forgive other people. Everything becomes discipleship. Matthew won't let you keep faith in a safe little corner. It's the arc of the whole gospel. If you look at everything we've done in this series, Matthew's arc becomes totally obvious. He starts out with the call, and then discipleship forms. The habits, the heart, the questions, the living in community, the fundamental mission, and it ends with Jesus commissioning the disciples to reproduce the process in others. Make disciples, teach obedience, trust my presence. And that's why the Great Commission isn't just the ending, it's the whole book in one paragraph. And so if we take a quick look and pull back to the ecclesia that we have, the church, and we understand its role, then we can take a look at this from Matthew's perspective and see why he would say that the church exists to hold the process of discipleship. And this is where he gets extremely practical. The church exists to hold people through the process of becoming disciples, not to make it painless. Matthew never promises painless, but to make it possible. And I think this is where our challenge from the church that we have lived in with its weekly worship that is very passive and not very formative really has to take a look at whether or not it's going to exist past its current form and what it could be about. And the only answer to that is what Matthew would say, is that we're called to make disciples. Is our church a place where you learn to practice forgiveness, like Matthew 18 teaches? Is that really what we do? Or do you learn to reconcile? And is the church a place where we can do actual truth telling about things? Or do we have to keep things hidden and quiet to keep people's sensitivities at bay? That's the difference between a consumer religion and a discipleship making community. Do you learn how to pray where it actually reshapes you? Do you learn how to live the Beatitudes together and confess openly about failure, not just in a ritual setting, but in a way that asks for true help? And that's why this consumer church model is such a dead end. Consumer church treats people as customers to make them happy and to hope that their happiness or all their questions get answered. It's very nice for the folks that we, do that to, but it doesn't create disciples. Every person that Matthew Church would encounter would be treating everyone as a disciple in training and not change that relationship into something else. We end where Matthew ends in this podcast, the promise that makes it all possible. Jesus says he has authority. And then he says, I am with you always. Matthew's gospel begins with God with us, Emmanuel. And it ends with Jesus promising the same reality. I'm still with you. So discipleship is not you trying to be heroic or me trying to do something that's, untenable. Discipleship is us practicing the way of Jesus while still being accompanied by Jesus. That's why you can fail and keep walking. That's why you can ask questions and not be ashamed. That's why your heart can break and still come back to life. Because you and I are not alone on the road. So if Matthew has been nagging at you this whole series, here's the invitation. Stop waiting until you fully understand. Step into the walk. Follow so that the learning can begin, because follow me is not a test. It's an opening. And the learning happens along the way. Thanks, everybody, for being part of this Why Matthew text and study and podcast series. This is the 6th episode of the 6th, and I just want to thank you again for your participation and prayers. May we together hear these words, and may it call us back to the core of the church's call, and may it help invite us into a deeper understanding of Matthew this year as we hear it and as we continue to encounter the systems that we know and the call to become something that does this work of discipleship making in the future. Have a great day. Peace be with you, and thanks for being here. Bye-bye.